I'm gonna put that right there, and that's very unintrusive, and that just records everything we're saying.
I won't say anything I shouldn't.
Well, this is just for my notes, so you can even say things you shouldn't if you want to.
Well, I appreciate your coming over.
Well, I appreciate your service first off, and you've seen the TV show, I take it.
Several times.
Yeah. Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing that. We've been doing that about a year and a half now.
Have you really?
The show, yeah.
Are you involved in writing any of the articles that go in the...
No, that's Bill Youngkin.
Oh. Okay.
Bill Youngkin does that. He's an attorney here in town.
Oh, yeah, I know the name.
Yeah, Bill Youngkin. That's who does that. But I've stolen some of his subjects, and he's stolen a few of mine. So he's been on my show. You've
got a pretty good mine of people around here, although we the World War II ones are going fast.
Unfortunately. Well, tell me about your service. Sort of where'd you grow up, and how'd you get in, and where'd you go? And
I grew up in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an Okie.
Yes, sir.
Oklahoma City. I went to OU, graduated in 42, and went in the service in actually early 43. January 43.
Yes, sir.
Went through basic training there, and then went to OCS. Following OCS, I didn't want to go to a gun battalion. I've been around them before. So a buddy of mine, we lived in tents during OCS, suggested going to what was known as Sound and Flash School.
Now, where'd you go to basic training?
Fort Sill.
At Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Okay.
Went to OCS there.
Okay.
Went to Sound and Flash School there.
Okay.
So I was at Sill for almost a year.
Yes, sir.
But after Sound and Flash, or Observation School, I went to a new unit at Camp Gordon, Georgia, which is now Fort Gordon, right out of Augusta.
Right.
We started a new unit in January of 44, and I went overseas then in September 44, and finally got into combat along in, I guess late October, early November of 44.
So where did you go?
I was
overseas. In Europe. Okay.
I was in Europe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We were in originally in the Hurtgen Forest area. As you're up on World War II history.
I'm getting a lot better at it.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
The Americans liberated Paris along about the last of August. Then they thought, well, we can just move right on, and we'll be in Berlin by Christmas. It didn't work that way. By the time they got to the border, Germany, the German resistance stiffened, and then from late October, November, December, and January, and into February, things were stalemated.
Right.
It was winter time.
Oh, yeah.
The weather was horrible, and we were in the Hurtgen Forest, which is east of Aachen, about 20 miles behind with the 4th Division. They were the ones that were there.
Right.
And finally we got out of there in February, moved on to the Rhine, crossed the Rhine, mopped up the Ruhr, and then one day we got orders, my battalion, we were Corps troops. We got orders to move to the Elbe River, which they pronounce Elbe, I guess. And I wondered why in the world. We thought we were settled there for the rest of the war because, they were mopping up the Germans. Most of them were captured. And I thought, well, the war's over and we're safe.
Yeah, because the Bulge was over by now, wasn't it?
Bulge started 16th of December.
Okay,
and
44.
Of 44.
Right, okay.
And lasted until about a month.
Right, okay.
But they put us, my battalion, in a 200-mile march from in the center of Germany around Wiesbaden, some of those towns, clear to the Elbe River. And we got there before the infantry did. And I've written out a little thing that you can take with you to read. But I think why they wanted us there, at that time the Russians were in Berlin. we moved up there about the third week in April. The Russians were in the edge of Berlin and were taking care of it. And Eisenhower issued orders for us not to cross the Elbe. I mean, they didn't. This was about 40 miles west of Berlin, where we were, right directly west. And I think they wanted us there because we were an intelligence gathering outfit. We put up a base to monitor any Russian artillery. And they wanted to make sure the Russians, if they came west of Berlin, across the Elbe, that we would be aware of it. Troops would be, so they could make changes. But that briefly is a thumbnail sketch of.
Well, take me back to flash and sound. Talk about what that is, because I haven't really been able to highlight that so far on the show. What did you learn at Flash and Sound School?
Sound and flash.
Sound and flash, excuse me.
That's all right, same thing.
Yeah.
Is an intelligence gathering unit. We were made up of 2 batteries, A and B, and a headquarters, a small unit. Our whole battalion, and we were a self-contained unit, had only about 250, maybe 400 men, officers and men. Sound. Now remember, this is back in the dark days.
Right.
It's pretty sophisticated now, but we would put out microphones. Well, first let me back up. We were corps troops, and headquarters battery was primarily a surveying unit whose job was to survey in all the gun positions within that particular corps.
Okay.
Corps, you know, is made up of divisions, and divisions made up of regiments and so forth. So sound would put out, survey would put out 6 microphones, about 4 sound seconds apart. A sound travels roughly 400 yards a second. So the mics would be
about 1,600 yards.
About a mile apart.
About a mile apart.
They put out 6. They'd survey them in. Connect them by telephone wires to the CP command post where we were. We had 2 OPs, outposts, out in front of them, and they put these mics as far forward as they could, of course, to pick up the sound of enemy artillery. So when the people at the OP, they were manned 24 hours a day, heard around, they'd punch a button, it would activate a machine at the CP, which printed out on tape, a little bit like an EKG machine. At the time, it would print out when the sound hit each mic. So we worked on a plotting table. We had the mics plotted. And by back plotting, taking the time differences, you could pinpoint within reasonable accuracy where the gun was that fired the round.
I'll be darned.
Now, it was pretty sophisticated for 1944. And it
sounds pretty sophisticated right now.
Well, they're doing a whole lot better.
I'll bet they are.
But it was interesting. And then we would, if we got good plots on a gun position, at that time the Germans were in a defensive mode, of course, so the guns were all pretty much in the same spot. They didn't move them around. Then we would give this location to Corps, and intelligence would look it over, and if they felt advisable, they would call for a, you know what a TOT is? Time on target?
Okay.
They would neutralize that gun position by calling for a time on target from however many guns they thought it would take. A TOT is simply a means of firing no matter where the gun is and what the caliber is, firing them so they all land at the same time. Time on target.
Right.
Some might be 155 howitzers, might be 105, might be 240s, but no matter where they were, the gun battalion fire direction center would plot the length of time, time of flight of that round. Everybody would do that so that then they would say the TOT is at 2 p.m. or whatever. And then they would fire so that that round, no matter where it originated, would land at altogether on the time on target. And it's a devastating thing because nothing's happening, and then whoom, here may come in 15 or 20 rounds, landing immediately.
Yeah.
So that briefly is what we did.
Yeah.
With sound. Now flash was visual. They had a flash platoon in each of these batteries. They would get up in a church steeple or some high point with a high magnifying optical instrument like a theodolite or some type of unit that they could see. They would measure the distance between these. They had two of them between these two flash OPs called a short base. If they could see a flash, they both would mark it. And as you know from trigonometry, when you have one side and two angles, then you've got a third angle, then you can plot where the flash was.
Right.
So it's just basic trigonometry.
Math and engineering comes together to fight a war.
That's right.
Yeah. I've had one other guest on my show that it was the same sort of subject matter of how he's Bill Kling.
I remember the name.
Who
Yeah.
started Kling Engineering here in town.
Yeah.
And he used his surveying and engineering
Yeah.
skills to
Yeah.
end the war for that. And this is the same kind of
Tied in together.
yeah. The same kind of deal. So when you were with the Fourth Army, is that right? Is that who you
Ninth
were?
Army.
The Ninth Army. Okay.
16th Corps.
16th Corps.
We were up at the north edge of the American effort.
Right. When did you? So you went overseas in 44.
September 44.
September 44. This was about 3 months after the invasion, right? It was in June.
August. Yeah.
Yeah, about 3 months after the invasion.
Right.
And where did you go first? Where did you actually land?
We landed at Omaha Beach.
You landed at Omaha Beach.
We went over on a ship called the USS Manhattan, which was a big luxury liner.
Right.
They had 12,000 troops and a crew of about 4,000. We went over by ourselves, landed in Liverpool, got on a train, went to Southampton, got on a boat, and went
around to Normandy.
Normandy.
I see.
I think the colonel, we had no reason to land in Normandy, but I think the old man wanted the pleasure of saying we landed on Omaha Beach. And
it was already a famous place.
there wasn't anybody there, except...
What was Normandy like 3 months later? Was it just...
Oh, it was still torn up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All of the concrete gun emplacements were there,
Right.
and the whole thing had just devoid of people. But we got off of this little old boat and marched up a hill, and right there at the top of the hill, which is incidentally not far from Point de Hoc,
Right.
which you're familiar with,
Right.
there was
General Rudder.
there was this American cemetery where all of the casualties from Omaha and I guess D-Day
Right.
were temporarily buried. They've moved them inland now about a mile.
I see. Yeah.
But then we thought, man, if they want us this bad, we're going to be in combat in 3 days. We sat on that Cherbourg Peninsula for 6 weeks waiting for our equipment to arrive.
My goodness.
We didn't have any trucks.
Yeah.
We didn't have anything to eat. We didn't have anything in the mud and rain of France. Finally, the stuff showed up, so we took off.
Right.
And
Right. And that's where then you took off through France and into Germany.
into the edge, right.
Right.
I had one interesting experience while we were waiting. They sent me and one of my lieutenants up into Belgium. I think I took about 15 of my platoon enlisted men with me on a French train to pick up a train of German POWs. It was French train operators. We were there in Cherbourg, so we got on the train and went to Paris. We took our sea rations and stuff with us, and we're living there. So these two-man crew got into Paris, into the train station. I didn't know where we were. So they just stopped and left. They were gone for 24 hours, no telling what they were doing. Finally, they came back, and we went up to Namur, Belgium, and hooked up 50 carloads of German POWs. They had put them in these box cars, 50 to a car, 2,500 POWs. Locked the doors shut, and these guys, these Germans, some of them were wounded, some of them were almost dead. Put them in there with water and a little food, and we headed back, and it was so, I felt sorry for them. In fact, they were punching holes in the roof of the boxcars to get some air.
Right.
So I stopped once, had the train stop, and let them out for a little air. But we got them all back, 2,500 of those suckers.
Right.
But
where'd you come back to?
Cherbourg.
Back to Cherbourg.
Yeah. Up in that general area.
Right. Right.
So.
So now you were a platoon leader, is that right?
I was promoted to first lieutenant. I was sound officer.
Right.
Here's an interesting bit. December 16th is a red letter day. The day the bulge started. Right. Eisenhower got his 5th star, and I was promoted to first lieutenant.
All on December 16th.
Not on the same orders as Eisenhower, obviously. But we moved into the Hurtgen Forest in I guess early November, and then it began to snow and get cold, and it was a bad winter because it snowed about yay deep,
right? And
the weather, they said, was the worst of the century. Yeah, it would be down, close to zero. Yeah, and we weren't equipped for it. Yeah, my men didn't even have overshoes. Right. I had bought a pair and taken with me for some reason. I don't know why, but.
So were you in the area what was considered the Battle of the Bulge?
Oh yes, sir.
So you were there. So so you remember the cold, because that's the main thing I hear from people that are in the Bulge, is just how bitterly cold.
It was horrible.
People just trying to keep
trying to live.
Yeah, trying
to live. Now remember, we weren't combat troops. Right. But they told us that our mission was to get as far forward as possible. So my OPs were out with the infantry outposts. Right. My CP was as far forward as I could get it, because of each one of these microphones had to have a direct telephone line into the CP. And the communication, we had a communications squad that was out there 24 hours a day patching lines. The GIs would see these mics and think, man, I don't know what that is, I'm going to blow it up. So they'd blow them up, the trucks would run over them.
I think it was a mine or something like that, right? Right. Yeah.
But I often wondered, after I'd been in combat for a week or so, why nobody ever visited me. It was so darn far forward. They were safe back there. Yeah. I don't think we ever had any visitors above Battery. The battalion never came up to see us. But,
so you experienced some pretty hairy times, I guess, right?
That was the worst part right there. We were living in dugouts in this area. The Hurtgen Forest, Tom, is pines, tall pines, just as thick as hair on a dog's back. And the Germans would fire their artillery in and split the trees, and then the shrapnel would rain down. And the dugout, we found a dugout that somebody else had made with trees on top of it, and that's what I used for a CP. But there was one about, I don't know, 25, 30 yards away that got a direct hit one night and took care of them.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anybody wounded in the Hurtgen Forest. I didn't lose anybody there. But it was
That's a small miracle, right there.
pretty hairy experience.
So you weren't wounded.
No.
You were, but you encountered a lot of potential that.
I had several men wounded by shrapnel.
Right.
We lost altogether in my battery maybe half a dozen men. Most of them survey and communications guys who were out there where they were in the open.
Right. Right.
So we stayed there. And one footnote: during this time, we were in our initial installation, and we were there until we made one move a little north. But we were there until we crossed the Roar River in February and moved on. But they said that we had located some 65 enemy gun positions that they neutralized, which helped. So
so
we paid our way.
You were doing your job. So this is how you spent the war, as a sound guy, and putting these microphones out at about a mile apart. And I guess you finish one job and move on to another.
That's right. Yeah. They'd pull the mics up and load them up and go to where they said go next.
Right.
And we were in about 3 positions after that before we got to the Rhine River. And they crossed the Rhine then about the middle of March, I believe. And
1945.
45.
Right.
After we had a base at the Rhine. We were up there for about 3 weeks maybe before they crossed. And we did quite a bit of location work. But after we got past the Rhine, the Germans were in a defensive position, and they had no gun emplacements. They'd mount their guns on tanks or prime movers and fire a few rounds and then move.
Right.
Self-propelled stuff.
Right.
But one interesting experience, when we crossed the Rhine, at the day before, the night before the troops went across, the Army moved up 67 battalions of field artillery. And you know how big a battalion is in a 105. They've got 12 guns. There were 700 and some odd weapons. Everything from 75 pack howitzers to 8-inch guns. And this was after dark. HR, at HR -1, they all began to fire at maximum range. And you never saw such a sight in the sky in your life. I'm giving you a lesson here on artillery, which is superfluous, but the Army had developed a variable time fuse called a VT fuse, which goes on a shell. In the old days, prior to that, if you wanted an airburst from an artillery shell, you had to set the time in the fuse. Figure time of flight and say, well, 23 seconds, and it'll go off maybe 20 feet above the ground, because that's your most lethal burst. But this VT fuse was a radar fuse, and it would go off when the signal hit something and then bounce back. It would detonate the gun, the shell. There were so many shells in the air, they were detonating each other. It was a gigantic 4th of July. I wish I had a camera to take a picture of it. But
so the radar, instead of hitting the ground, would hit another shell.
Hit another shell.
And detonate it.
Yeah. And 700 and some odd guns firing at once. There's bound to be a lot of overlap.
Right.
But it so paralyzed the Germans on the other side that our troops went for miles with no resistance. Yeah. And after we crossed the Rhine, things leveled off quite a bit. We didn't put up any more bases, and we were sitting there. This was about, I don't know, maybe the middle of April, didn't have anything to do, and the sun was shining, and there wasn't anything going on. We thought, man, we got it made. No more war. I mean, we were living off the land. And then we got this order to move to the Elbe River, and I thought, what in the world? I think our colonel was a little bit kind of a glamour guy, you know, he wanted to be in on things, but I never did tell him, naturally. But we moved in about the 20th of April. We moved by battery, from where we were down in Central Europe up around Hanover and got to the Elbe in one day. And like I said, we weren't combat troops.
Right.
And there were German troops scattered through this whole darn area. And our men were armed with carbines, the men, enlisted men, and all we had was sidearms, 45.
Right.
But we ran into a mess of Germans, and they shot up one truck and killed one of the lieutenants and 2 or 3 of the men. But we kept on going, and when we got to the Elbe, there wasn't anything there. No infantry, no nothing. You may remember from history that about the 3rd week in April, American troops and Russians had joined up down at Torgau or somewhere, down below Magdeburg, about 100 miles south of where we were. But there weren't any infantry up where we were. I mean, it was very peaceful and all. So I found a CP I've got a picture of it in there if you'd like to see it, in a German baron's hunting lodge. And we sat there and watched the Germans surrendering, getting away from the Russians until the war was over.
Yeah. So you were there. You were still on duty when when the war ended. And then what did you have to stay there and clean up, or did you come home after that? Or
well, we moved back as a battalion after we were up there till the war was over. I think 7th or 8th of May, and we moved back as a battalion, and they thought we were going to be shipped to the Far East, and they broke us up, and I went to a gun battalion, and an order came out for anybody who was first lieutenant and had so much certain amount of time and grade could apply for liaison pilot training at SIL. You know what they are, spotter pilots, with the understanding that once you finished, if the war was still on, you'd go to Japan.
Right.
Well, I said, well, I'm going to take a chance. I wanted to go home. I had a girlfriend and all that. So the orders came through, and I was at Le Havre, France, the day they dropped the first atomic bomb. And I was out in the middle of the Atlantic when they dropped the second one.
So you were on your way home.
I was on my way home. But I stayed in a little longer after that. Yeah. And was down to Fort Sill as an instructor and messing around.
I see. And then what was your career after that, after you
Well, I
retired from the service?
I didn't retire. I made a mistake staying in the reserves. And on September the 5th, I got a telegram saying, report to Fort Sill for active duty. But fortunately, I knew somebody there I'd served with, and I ended up as an instructor at the gunnery department.
I see.
For 2 years. I was called back for 2 years.
At Fort Sill again? Okay.
So I survived that.
Yeah.
But when I got out second time, I said, that's it.
That's it.
I don't want any more.
When would that have been? What year was that?
52.
52.
September of 52.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what?
Well, I went into marketing and sales. I was with Procter & Gamble for 5 years, and struck out on my own, and had a kind of an entrepreneurial bent, and started an oil field service company at the wrong time, right when prices were 50 cents a barrel. And finally, I taught on with several companies. I came down here in '68 originally. Are you from around here?
I've been here for 20 years.
20 years?
Yeah.
Where are you from originally?
San Antonio.
Oh, are you?
That's where I grew up.
Where you grew up?
Yeah.
You know the name Ford Albritton, of course.
Yeah. Sure.
Ford had a Lenco at that time. This was spring of '68. And I knew the guy, I'd known him, Andy Davis, who was Ford's vice president. He was looking for a sales manager for, they had a hydraulic crane division. And I was sales manager of a company in Oklahoma City doing the same thing. Well, Andy invited me down. They gave me a big sales pitch and blah, blah, blah. And so I came down. 6 months later, Ford sold the company.
But did you stay with them?
No, there wasn't anything to stay with.
Oh, because he sold it. Okay.
They got rid of it.
Okay.
But
you were here.
I was here.
Okay.
But I had 2 boys. My oldest boy had finished up at OU, but my second child was a junior in high school. And my youngest one was 7th grade, I think. Anyway, Louise and I discussed it, and we decided it's a nice place to live, so I stayed here. And I hooked on with a company out of Chicago as regional sales manager, and traveled out of here, and was here until for 10 years. Then the company transferred me to Dallas, and we lived there, and then I moved up to Denton, and I finally retired. And
what year was that?
'94.
And then came back here?
Came back down here.
I see. So that's when you moved into this house.
Yeah. Steve is my middle son. He's with TTI.
Okay.
He heads up the rail research division. He's one of their associate directors over there. He went through A&M, got his master's and his PhD, and my oldest boy is a double E up in Fort Collins, Colorado. And my youngest son, unfortunately, passed away in '99. He was born with a congenital heart defect.
I see.
And survived several operations.
Yeah. How old was he?
He was 43.
43.
But he had been married and had 3 little boys. They lived with their mother over in Austin.
Right.
So.
Right.
And I had lost my wife in the year prior to that.
In '98?
98. 98. So. So I'm a widower.
Yeah.
Just doing the best I can.
Yeah. What was your wife's name?
Louise.
Louise? How long were y'all married?
53 years.
53 years.
Doesn't seem possible looking back.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
You have children?
Yeah, yeah. I have 3 sons.
3 sons.
I have 4 grandkids. So you have grandkids?
8.
8? Good.
4 boys and 4 girls.
Oh my goodness.
Steve has 3 girls, and David, the deceased one, had 3 little boys.
Oh my goodness.
And my oldest boy has a boy and a girl.
Right, right.
So.
So now your son who passed away, where is his wife is where's
she's remarried and lives in Austin.
In Austin? Okay. You still keep in contact with her? Yeah.
Yeah, I see the boys quite often.
I see.
Have them over, and I go over there and visit them. And so. Yeah, we stay close.
Well, that's wonderful. That's a great story. The wonderful thing about doing this is I learn something different every day, and I did not know about sound and flash.
Sound and flash.
I mean, I knew about a lot of the engineering and how, like, talking to Mr. Kling and all of that, but I knew they had to figure that out somehow. But that's the first time it's been explained to me that there were people who made a career out of doing that, and you were really, I mean, you were in harm's way, you and your people. I mean,
yes, we were. We sure were.
With only a sidearm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we didn't ever have to be attacked. But
what's the closest you feel that you ever came to packing it in? I mean, things landing around you and all that. Were there times that you actually feared that this was it?
Well, I had nightmares for a long time afterwards. I still do.
Yeah.
When we were in the Hurtgen Forest, we got artillery. We got shelled regularly.
Right.
Yeah. And like I said, this dugout next to us got hit, direct hit, and killed several people.
And this was during the winter?
Yes, it was during the winter. Cold, I mean. miserable.
Indeed.
My wife never understood why I didn't like to camp out after that.
Okay.
A side note on Sound and Flash, you may be aware, you've heard of the massacre at Malmedy?
Yes.
That was Battery B of the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They shouldn't have been where they were.
Right.
But it was a foul up.
Yeah.
But I knew most of the officers in that because we'd gone to school together at Fort Sill.
Right.
So they were a sister battalion to ours.
Of yours.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you're in a combat zone, you're liable, you know,
Oh, sure.
to get hit.
Absolutely.
But I didn't lose anybody on the OPs, but I remember lots of times they'd say, Lieutenant, we better not talk for a while. There's a German patrol coming down the street, you know, this type of stuff.
Have you got some pictures?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go look.
Okay, let me tell you one more thing first.
Okay. Go ahead.
While we were on the Elbe,
Uh-huh.
and I've got this written out.
Right. Good. Yeah, I'm glad you do.
My man said, I've got some stuff here you might like to look at. And the Germans that were surrendering were throwing all their weapons away before they crossed the river. The bridge was blown out and they'd come across in rubber boats. So I was down at the river one day with a buck sergeant named Gerald Roop, and I said, Dusty, let's go across the river and see what we can find. Well, we had orders not to cross the Elbe, but we weren't going to shoot anybody. So we got a rubber boat and went across, and about that time a car pulled up, and 4 German officers got out. And I said, are you through with your car? And the guy said, it sure is good to hear English. He said, he gave me a short, whether he was lying or not, I don't know, but he spoke good English. He was a doctor who from Brooklyn who had gone back to Germany early in the war or before and got pressed into service. He'd been over there the whole time. So we got in the car and headed east and drove slowly. It was a nice day, you know, nothing going on. And we drove for about 10 or 15 minutes, and Dusty said, we're not going clear to Berlin, are we, Lieutenant? We were about 40 miles west of it. And suddenly here comes 3 big stake-bodied trucks with the back, you know, full of German soldiers standing up.
Right.
3 of them, 3 trucks. And I thought, oh my God, what now? But I stopped the car.
You're driving the car.
I'm driving the car. Got out in front of the trucks and I held up my hand. And I said, throw all your weapons over here on the side and go on up to the river and surrender. And their mouths dropped open. I guess I was the first GI they'd ever seen. So here comes the pistols flying out and the rifles. We didn't want the rifles. And I said, I need some belts too. So here comes a half a dozen belts to string the pistols on.
Right.
So we ended up with 150 or 75 pistols. And they left and we loaded up, went back to the river, went back to the CP and dumped them on a table and said, help yourself.
Oh my goodness.
I wrote this out one time, and you can take it with you.
Great.
I wrote that for my kids. But, so I can honestly say, I won't say it's an honor, but I had the dubious distinction of being the GI that got closest to Berlin on the ground during the war. Except for, you know, Air Corps guys that were shot down.
Right.
But
Yeah.
Anyway, that's,
I'll be darned.
here's some, I don't know whether you want pictures or anything.
Yes, I do.
Uh,
See what you got.
Let me show you
Okay.
pictures first of the, where's mine? Here. There's a picture of the Baron's Hunting Lodge. There's another view. This guy had been a lieutenant colonel in the German army and was wounded and retired. And he had a house in Berlin, apparently was blown up, but they had moved out here. Completely undamaged because there hadn't been any war there. And when I saw it, I said, we're going to use that for our CP. So I told him, went in and talked to him. There's a picture of him.
So this was your command post here, was right
Yeah.
here.
We ended the war in good shape, living in luxury. And I've got his uniform. He gave it to me.
I'll be darned.
And there's pictures, not very good pictures, but Germans surrendering, coming across the river. There's a picture of me on the balcony of the Baron's place. There's another picture of that.
So when would this have been in 1945?
That was
This would have been
May, at the end of the war.
the end of the war.
We were there from about the
After the surrender, I guess, right?
No.
Or right before,
No,
okay.
we were there about almost 3 weeks before the surrender,
I see.
before the official surrender. But in the period of 10 days, something like 1 million Germans surrendered there at that point, getting away from the Russians. And the Russians would sit back and fire artillery into the middle of them to just from.
So they surrender for protection.
Oh yeah, they want to get into the American side.
Yeah.
That's why these 3 trucks full of German GIs.
Right. Didn't mess with you.
Not a bit.
Yeah.
It's a wonder one of them wasn't an SS.
Because they were looking for
They
were looking for a way for safety. And that was to surrender to escape the Russians.
Absolutely. Here's
the Russians were still in the fighting mode.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
3 years ago,
Oh
Tom.
my goodness.
I'll explain what that is. 3 years ago, my 2 boys and I went back to Normandy. We went across to see where I'd been in '44, and this is a picture.
Is this
Saint Mary Glise.
Saint Mary Glise, yeah.
That's where if you remember the movie,
Right.
where the guy hung on there.
There's red buttons.
That's right, and that's still there. That I took this when we were there 3 years ago. They've got this effigy hanging on the cathedral right there.
Right. Yeah, that's a scene from The Longest Day.
That's right. That's it.
I'll be darned.
Yes, sir.
And that's a permanent display on that church.
It sure is.
I'll be darned.
There's not a very good picture of the American cemetery there at Omaha. It's a beautiful spot.
Oh yeah, I know people who I've never been there.
9,700 men are buried there. These are nothing. I mean,
is that you still?
yeah, that's me.
Let me see.
From what you can see. And there's my platoon at the end of the war, before they broke us up.
Citadel, Able Ranger.
Citadel was the battalion, and Able was battery, and Ranger was the sound.
Where are you in this picture? In the middle? Right there? First lieutenant?
Yep. That's me.
These are great pictures. I can use all of these.
Good.
I'll put them in here.
Take them.
And,
Now,
okay.
I don't know whether you want to see any of this, or whether you want even.
Yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, I might want you to bring it with you, and
Okay.
we'll put it out on the table.
All right.
Show.
There's the colonel's hat.
Is that little colonel that was in the picture?
That's him. I gave all this stuff to Steve. My.
What was the colonel's name? Do you know?
Itson Platts, or something like that. I should have known better.
Goodness, I can't believe I'm holding a hat of a Nazi.
Of a Nazi officer,
Nazi
a
officer.
lieutenant colonel in the cavalry who was wounded. There's an SS dress dagger.
Oh my Lord. Goodness gracious.
Pretty?
I can't believe it.
Here
Did
is.
he give you this too? I mean,
No, I don't remember where I got that. I picked it up somewhere.
Wow.
Here is as you know, the old spike helmet.
Yeah.
That I got there at his place. That was made in 1909. It's got the date in it.
Right.
And
Goodness gracious, I've never seen anything like this.
here's, not long after we went in combat, I found this, so I wrote my parents' address on a piece of cardboard and stuck it on the helmet, and it mailed it back, and they got it.
Just mail it like
Just
this.
like that.
I'm surprised somebody didn't want it more than you did on the way.
Considering the number of hands it went through.
Yeah. A lot of honest people.
That's right. Funny. Well, let's see here.
Goodness gracious. This is just...
God is with us.
Uh-huh.
Ultimate Moose. There's a couple of Luger.
German Lugers?
German Luger. They're not the Lugers, it's the holsters.
Yeah, the holster.
But I've got a Luger.
And the boots.
Yeah, those are his boots. He gave me, I said, are you sure you want to get rid of that? And he said, I don't need it anymore. And I think he was afraid that he was going to end up.
And that's his armband?
That's the armband.
Oh, wow.
Yep. A real one.
Yeah, please just bring this
Bring it
box.
all?
Yeah, bring the box with you.
I'll bring it all.
And this is his uniform?
It's the blouse.
Yeah.
Here, let's take it out. You can...
Bring that too.
I will.
We'll hang it up.
Okay. I
Yeah.
had the boot pants, and you know, they got away. Something happened to them. Go ahead and pull that up. He was about my size, so
Yeah.
I've had it on.
Unbelievable. I cannot imagine what the value of all of this must be.
I don't know, but the intrinsic value is
man.
even. Now, I don't know whether you want to display a gun or not, but I've got a mint Luger,
That's a German Luger?
German Luger.
No, this is fine. Yeah.
Be all right to take it in and display it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just bring it in the case.
I will. Of course, there's no ammunition in
Sure,
it,
yeah,
of course.
right.
I took that off of a big, tall German lieutenant colonel up on the Elbe River. He was standing there directing troops across, and I walked up to him and I said, "Bitte, please." And I got that and a pair of field glasses, which I gave to my other son. And but
This is just amazing.
don't bother to put it away. I'll put it back.
Okay, I'll let you put it back the way you want it to. Wow.
But
Yeah, please bring the box
I will.
and the uniform.
I'll bring it all.
And we'll display it, and we'll spend a certain part of the show just holding these things up and you talking about them.
Well, kind of interesting
Yeah.
from the standpoint of
Yeah.
people. Now,
Wow.
when do you want to? Tape.
We tape at 1:30. If you could be there at about 1:15 on Wednesday,
Okay.
and
Over at the studio.
at the KAMU studios. Do you know where that is on?